Did you know that right beneath the postcard views of one of the world's most beautiful cities lies a shadow world, where construction sites become battlegrounds and government housing projects turn into murder scenes? The story I'm about to tell you isn't just about crime. It's about how a single man transformed Cape Town's criminal landscape and became known as its underworld king. By the end of this video, you'll understand how Marcus Venter built his empire on blood, why housing projects worth millions came to a standstill, and what happened when a city official named Patricia Foster showed up at the wrong construction site at exactly 11:15 on a Tuesday morning. Let me take you inside Cape Town's deadliest gang war, one that's still claiming lives today. Port Haven, a slice of paradise on South Africa's coast. Tourists flock to see the mountain that towers over crystal waters. They snap photos of colorful houses, sample wines from nearby vineyards, and walk beaches that stretch for miles. But just 25 minutes from the luxury hotels and trendy restaurants of Port Haven's waterfront, the Westfield Township tells a different story. Here, gunshots are as common as bird calls. Small business owners hand over cash to men in expensive cars just to stay alive. And children grow up knowing which streets to avoid and when to run. In Westfield, construction sites that should be building future homes sit abandoned, surrounded by concrete barriers and razor wire. The reason? A criminal network that's strangling the city's development and the man who rules it all. On February 22nd, 2023, just after 11 in the morning, a white Audi pulled up to the gate of the Westfield Symphony Road housing project. Inside sat 47-year-old Patricia Foster, an environmental assessment officer for the Port Haven municipality. She was there for a routine inspection, something she'd done hundreds of times in her 22-year career with the city. As the security guard handed her the visitor log, another car appeared behind her. Two men stepped out, walked to her window, and without saying a word, fired 17 shots. Patricia's foot hit the accelerator as bullets tore through her body, sending the car crashing into the site's fence. By the time police arrived, she was dead. Her colleague, who had been in the passenger seat, survived with gunshot wounds to the shoulder. Within hours, the construction site went silent. Workers disappeared. Security guards quit. And another crucial housing project in a city desperate for affordable homes ground to a halt. Why would anyone target a city environmental official? Why would criminals risk everything to stop the construction of government-subsidized housing? The answers lie in what's become known in Port Haven as the Construction Mafia, a network of extortion, violence, and corruption that has infiltrated every level of the city's building industry. Have you seen similar extortion happening in your city? Let me know in the comments. Let's go back 3 years to understand how this all started. Port Haven, like many South African cities, faces a housing crisis. Thousands of people live in makeshift homes in informal settlements, where clean water, electricity, and proper sanitation are luxuries. In 2020, the city announced its largest housing initiative ever, a project called Symphony Road, that would build over 3,300 government-subsidized homes for families from the poorest sections of Westfield Township. The project, a partnership between the city and the National Airports Company, came with a price tag of 520 million rand. That's about 30 million US dollars. It was meant to be a beacon of hope, a sign that things were changing for the better. Construction began in May 2021, with completion scheduled for late 2025. But from the very beginning, there were problems. Construction company trucks had their tires slashed. Workers were threatened. Then came the visitors, groups of men who showed up at the site demanding a cut of the project or offering security services that no one had requested. These weren't random criminals. They represented what locals call the numbers. Powerful prison gangs that have extended their reach beyond jail walls and into Port Haven's neighborhoods. In Port Haven, the most feared of these is the 27s gang, allegedly headed by a man named Marcus Venter. Marcus Venter isn't your typical gangster. Born in a middle-class family, he attended private schools before dropping out at 17. His first arrest came at 19 for car theft. By 25, he had built a reputation for ruthless efficiency in the drug trade. Now in his mid-40s, Venter has transformed himself into a businessman with interests in construction, security, and property development. Yet behind the tailored suits and luxury cars, intelligence sources say Venter remains the undisputed general of the 27s gang, a criminal organization responsible for drug trafficking, extortion, and dozens of murders across Port Haven. The Symphony Road housing project represented a golden opportunity for Venter's organization. With R500 million in play, even skimming a small percentage would mean millions in criminal profits. The method was simple. Approach contractors working on the project and demand they either pay protection money or subcontract work to companies controlled by the gang. Those who refused faced consequences. Equipment was vandalized. Workers were assaulted. In some cases, site managers received photos of their families, along with clear threats. The message was unmistakable. Pay up or else. By the end of 2021, most contractors on the Symphony Road project were quietly paying what amounted to a criminal tax. Some were handing over as much as 15% of their contract value. Others were forced to hire consultants who collected paychecks without ever showing up for work. The city knew something was wrong. Construction was falling behind schedule. Costs were spiraling, but few people were willing to speak openly about the extortion. Port Haven's Mayor Melissa Clark finally addressed the issue in January 2022, announcing a special task force to investigate criminal interference in city housing projects. "We cannot and will not allow criminals to hold our city's development hostage," she declared at a press conference. "Every home that doesn't get built because of extortion is a family that continues to live in poverty." It was a brave statement. It was also, as events would soon prove, a dangerous one. Just 2 weeks after the mayor's announcement, the first killing occurred. Thomas Gregory, a site foreman at Symphony Road, was shot dead while driving home from work. Police classified it as a carjacking gone wrong, but his co-workers knew better. Gregory had recently refused to approve invoices from a subcontractor with known gang connections. The murder sent shockwaves through the construction community. Several contractors pulled their workers from city housing projects, citing safety concerns. Others quietly went back to paying the extortion fees. Construction at Symphony Road slowed to a crawl. In response, the city increased security at the site, installing cameras and hiring armed guards. For a few months, things seemed to improve. Work resumed at a steady pace. The mayor announced that the project was back on track. Can't get enough true crime? Check out our playlist on international crime syndicates linked in the description. Then, in October 2022, something unexpected happened. Police arrested Vanessa Myers, a mid-level administrator in the city's housing department. The charges? Corruption and criminal conspiracy. According to prosecutors, Myers had been passing confidential information about city construction tenders to criminals linked to Marcus Venter. Electronic messages recovered from her phone showed Myers warning gang associates about upcoming police operations and providing detailed information about security measures at various construction sites. In exchange, she had received cash payments totaling over 150,000 rand, about $8,500. The arrest was significant for 2 reasons. First, it confirmed what many had suspected, that the criminal networks had infiltrated the city government itself. Second, it suggested that law enforcement was finally making progress against the Construction Mafia. But if anyone thought Myers' arrest would discourage the extortion rackets, they were badly mistaken. Instead, the criminal groups seemed to become more aggressive, perhaps fearing that their window of opportunity was closing. In December 2022, 3 separate housing project sites were firebombed in a single night. No one was injured, but the message was clear. The criminals were not backing down. In fact, they were escalating. Which brings us back to Patricia Foster and that fatal morning in February 2023. Foster wasn't directly involved in the housing department. As an environmental assessment officer, her job was to ensure construction projects complied with environmental regulations. She visited dozens of sites each month, checking everything from waste disposal practices to air quality impacts. So why was she targeted? Police investigators believe she was not the intended victim. The actual target was likely Donovan Pierce, the newly appointed project manager for Symphony Road. Pierce had been vocal about his refusal to cooperate with extortion attempts and had reported several threats to police. Pierce was scheduled to visit the site that morning, but changed his plans at the last minute. Foster, driving the same model and color car as Pierce, arrived at the time he was expected. In the brutal mathematics of gang violence, this coincidence cost her her life. If this video helped you understand the complex world of organized crime, give it a thumbs up to help others find it too. The murder of a city official, even if she wasn't the intended target, changed everything. Mayor Clark declared a crisis. The provincial governor offered a reward of 200,000 rand for information leading to the arrest of Foster's killers. A private donor added another R1,000,000 to the reward fund. The Symphony Road project was immediately halted, with all personnel pulled from the site. In the weeks that followed, public attention focused on the Construction Mafia as never before. Journalists published exposés detailing the extortion networks. Community meetings were held across Westfield Township, where residents shared stories of intimidation and violence. Political pressure mounted for police to take decisive action. Behind the scenes, the investigation into Foster's murder was making progress. Security camera footage, though grainy, had captured images of the shooter's vehicle. Cell phone records showed unusual activity in the area that morning. Informants, perhaps tempted by the substantial reward, began providing tips. Then, on April 17, 2023, police announced a breakthrough. They had arrested a 39-year-old man named Lucas Dieter in connection with the murder. Dieter, a former security guard with a record of assault charges, was allegedly the man who pulled the trigger. According to prosecutors, he had been hired to kill Donovan Pierce for 50,000 rand, roughly $2,800. Dieter's arrest was just the beginning. In the early hours of June 30th, police special forces raided a luxury home in the upscale Silvermine neighborhood of Port Haven. The target, Marcus Venter, and his wife Olivia Hendricks. The raid, involving more than 30 heavily armed officers, resulted in the arrest of both Venter and Hendricks. Police seized numerous items from the property, including firearms, documents, electronic devices, and more than 2 million rand in cash. The charges against Venter were extensive: racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, extortion, money laundering, and illegal possession of firearms. Hendricks faced charges of money laundering, fraud, and complicity in criminal enterprise. What made the arrests particularly significant was the evidence connecting Venter directly to companies that had been extorting construction projects across Port Haven. Police had uncovered a complex network of businesses, many registered in Hendricks's name, that had been receiving payments from contractors working on city housing projects. One of these companies, Silvermine Security Services, had been awarded contracts to provide security at several city construction sites, the very same sites where extortion had been taking place. Another company, Bayview Construction Supplies, had been forcing contractors to purchase materials at inflated prices. The investigation revealed that Hendricks, who presented herself as a successful businesswoman, was actually the financial brain behind Venter's criminal empire. Through a maze of shell companies and nominee directors, she had laundered millions in criminal proceeds, investing in legitimate businesses and luxury properties. Further investigation uncovered something even more disturbing: apparent connections between Venter's organization and high-ranking officials in the city government. electronic messages found on Hendrix's devices suggested regular communication with someone referred to only as the counselor. This led police to focus on Theodore Marcus, Port Haven's counselor for human settlements. Marcus, who had been appointed to the city's executive committee in 2020, was responsible for overseeing housing development projects, including Symphony Road. On July 20th, 2023, police commercial crimes unit officers raided Marcus's office, seizing computers, phones, and documents. While he wasn't immediately arrested, Marcus was suspended from his position pending investigation. The allegations against Marcus were explosive. According to police, he had provided Venter's organization with advance information about housing tenders, allowing gang-linked companies to tailor their bids. He had also allegedly manipulated the tender evaluation process to favor these companies. More disturbingly, police claimed that Marcus had received regular cash payments delivered to a house in Westfield owned by a known associate of Marcus Venter. These payments, ranging from 25,000 to 120,000 rand, were allegedly deposited into the account of Marcus's personal assistant, who then used the money to pay his personal expenses. Marcus vehemently denied all allegations, claiming he was being framed. "I've spent my career fighting for housing for the poor," he told reporters after his suspension. These accusations are not just false. They're an attempt to derail the city's housing program. The investigation into the Construction Mafia was now threatening to expose corruption at the highest levels of Port Haven's government. But even as police made progress, the situation on the ground remained dangerous. In Westfield Township, violence continued. Small business owners still faced extortion demands. Community leaders who spoke out against gang activity received threats. The Symphony Road housing project remained shuttered, its perimeter now guarded by private security contractors and regular police patrols. The human cost of this criminal interference was enormous. More than 3,300 families who had been promised homes were still living in overcrowded, unsafe conditions. The city had been forced to allocate an additional 45 million rand for security at various housing projects, money that could have built approximately 200 more homes. The court case against Marcus Venter and Olivia Hendrix began in September 2023. They appeared alongside Lucas Dieter and 11 other defendants, facing a combined total of 35 criminal charges. The courtroom was packed with journalists, curious onlookers, and heavily armed police officers. The state's case centered on the murder of Patricia Foster and the attempted murder of Donovan Pierce, but extended to encompass the entire criminal enterprise Venter had allegedly built. Prosecutors presented evidence showing how his organization had systematically extracted money from construction projects through threats, violence, and corruption. One key piece of evidence was a BMW that had been stolen from a former employee of Venter's who had become a state witness. According to prosecutors, in November 2022, the witness had received a warning that Venter wanted him dead. Fearing for his life, he abandoned his car at a secure complex in Rosemary Heights, a Port Haven suburb, and went into hiding. Hours later, Venter and Hendrix allegedly arrived at the complex with several men and removed the BMW using a tow truck. When security personnel questioned them, Hendrix reportedly claimed the car belonged to her company. Police later found the vehicle at a house in Westfield, known to be controlled by Venter's gang. More damning was the testimony of a former member of Venter's inner circle who had turned state witness. He described overhearing a conversation in which Venter instructed his cousin, Nathan Venter, to finish off the car's owner. Nathan Venter was later killed in Westfield in what police believe was part of an internal power struggle within the gang. As the trial progressed, it revealed the extent to which Venter's criminal organization had infiltrated Port Haven's construction industry. Contractors testified about being forced to pay protection money or face violence. City employees described how gang-linked companies had secured contracts through intimidation and corruption. One particularly disturbing pattern emerged. Venter's organization appeared to be systematically targeting government housing projects. These projects, with their large budgets and complex subcontracting structures, were particularly vulnerable to criminal exploitation. The trial also shed light on the personal story of Marcus Venter and his rise to power. Born into a working-class family in 1978, Venter had shown early promise as a student before turning to crime in his teens. His first serious conviction came at age 21 for armed robbery, resulting in a 6-year prison sentence. It was in prison that Venter reportedly joined the 27s gang, one of South Africa's notorious numbers gangs that originated in the prison system. By the time of his release in 2005, he had risen through the ranks to become a respected figure within the gang. Over the next decade, Venter built his criminal empire while maintaining a facade of legitimacy. He opened a car wash business, then expanded into security services and construction. He married Olivia Hendricks, a former bank employee with a head for finances, who helped transform his criminal proceeds into seemingly legitimate business interests. By 2015, Venter was living in a mansion in Silvermine, driving luxury cars and mingling with Port Haven's business elite. Few people outside law enforcement circles knew of his connections to the 27s gang or his role in the city's criminal underworld. The trial revealed how Venter had exploited Port Haven's housing crisis for profit. With thousands of families desperate for homes and billions of rand allocated for construction, the opportunities for criminal exploitation were enormous. His method was sophisticated. Rather than simply demanding cash from contractors, Venter's organization would create legitimate-seeming companies that would be inserted into the supply chain. A construction company might be forced to hire Venter-controlled security firms, buy materials from his suppliers, or subcontract portions of the work to his associates. This approach made the extortion harder to detect and investigate. Money wasn't changing hands in parking lots. It was flowing through business bank accounts, disguised as legitimate transactions. And with corrupt officials helping to cover their tracks, the criminal network operated with near impunity. The trial also revealed the human cost of the Construction Mafia's activities. Community leaders from Westfield testified about the impact of halted housing projects on the township's residents. Families who had been promised homes years ago were still living in shacks. Children were growing up in environments plagued by poor sanitation, overcrowding, and exposure to the elements. One witness, a 67-year-old grandmother named Margaret Benson, told the court how she had been on the waiting list for government housing since 1997. When her name finally came up for the Symphony Road project, she thought her decades-long wait was over. Then the project was halted after Patricia Foster's murder. "I've been waiting for a proper house for more than half my life," she testified. "Now, I don't know if I'll live long enough to get one." The trial of Marcus Venter and his co-accused continued through the fall of 2023, with prosecutors methodically building their case. Parallel investigations into corruption within the city government were ongoing, with Theodore Marcus and several other officials under scrutiny. In November 2023, there was another break though. Police arrested Jason Venter, Marcus's younger brother, in connection with a wave of intimidation targeting witnesses in the case. Jason had allegedly been running his brother's criminal operations since Marcus's arrest, ensuring that the extortion rackets continued even as the trial proceeded. This arrest highlighted a sobering reality. Even with Marcus Venter and Olivia Hendricks in custody, the criminal network they had built continued to function. The Construction Mafia had become larger than any individual. It was now an entrenched system with multiple leaders and operators. Despite these challenges, there were signs of progress. In December 2023, work resumed at the Symphony Road housing project, this time with unprecedented security measures. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter 24 hours a day. Workers were transported to and from the site in secure buses. Police maintained a visible presence in the area. Mayor Clark, speaking at a ceremony marking the project's restart, acknowledged the difficulties ahead, but struck a defiant note. "We will not allow criminals to steal the future from the people of Westfield. Every house we build is a victory against those who profit from our city's suffering." The first phase of the Symphony Road project, 500 homes, was scheduled for completion by the end of 2024. It was a far cry from the original timeline, but it represented real progress. For families like Margaret Benson's, it offered renewed hope. The effects of the construction mafia extended far beyond delayed housing projects. In Westfield and other townships around Port Haven, small business owners continued to face extortion demands. Shop owners, taxi drivers, and street vendors all paid protection fees to local gang members, many of them connected to Venter's organization. Neville Thompson, who ran a small grocery store in Westfield, described paying 1,000 Rand per week to men who never explicitly threatened him, but whose reputation made threats unnecessary. "They don't need to say what will happen if I don't pay," he explained. Everyone knows. The culture of fear created by years of gang violence made it difficult for police to gather information or for communities to organize resistance. People who spoke out against the gangs risked not only their own safety, but that of their families. As one community activist put it, "The gangs know where you live, where your children go to school, where your mother shops. No one wants to be the first to stand up." This fear extended to the justice system itself. Several witnesses in the Venter case had to be placed in witness protection programs. Prosecutors and police officers involved in the case received additional security. Even some journalists covering the trial reported receiving threats. Yet despite these challenges, the tide seemed to be turning. The publicity surrounding the Foster murder and the Venter trial had focused national attention on Port Haven's construction mafia. The national government allocated additional resources to combat organized crime in the region. Civil society organizations mobilized to support affected communities. In February 2024, 1 year after Patricia Foster's murder, a memorial service was held at the Symphony Road construction site. Foster's family, city officials, construction workers, and hundreds of community members gathered to remember her and reaffirm their commitment to completing the housing project. Foster's 21-year-old daughter, Michelle, spoke movingly about her mother's dedication to public service. "My mom spent her career trying to make Port Haven a better place," she said. "The best way to honor her is to finish what she was part of starting, building homes for the people who need them most." As the Symphony Road project slowly progressed, investigators continued their work on the broader criminal network. In March 2024, police arrested 3 senior executives from major construction companies operating in Port Haven. The charges: fraud, corruption, and complicity with criminal organizations. These arrests suggested that some construction companies hadn't merely been victims of extortion, they had been willing participants in corrupt practices. According to prosecutors, these companies had inflated contract prices to account for payoffs to criminal groups, effectively turning taxpayer money into criminal profits. The investigation also uncovered evidence that some companies had used the threat of gang violence as cover for their own corrupt practices. By attributing project delays and cost overruns to criminal interference, they could mask their own mismanagement and fraud. This complex web of corruption, crime, and complicity highlighted the challenges facing Port Haven. The construction mafia wasn't simply a criminal organization operating from outside the system. It had become intertwined with legitimate businesses and government functions. In April 2024, the trial of Marcus Venter and his co-accused entered its final phase. The prosecution had presented a mountain of evidence, including financial records, electronic communications, witness testimony, and forensic analyses. The defense had attempted to portray Venter as a legitimate businessman, targeted because of his success and his background. On May 15, 2024, after 8 months of proceedings, the verdict was delivered. Marcus Venter was found guilty on 22 of the 24 charges against him, including racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, extortion, and money laundering. Olivia Hendricks was convicted on 12 counts, primarily related to financial crimes. Lucas Dieter and 7 other defendants were also found guilty on various charges. 3 defendants were acquitted due to insufficient evidence. The judge, delivering a 400-page ruling, described Venter's criminal enterprise as a cancer that has eaten away at the fabric of Port Haven society. The sentencing hearing, held 2 weeks later, saw Venter receive multiple life terms plus 237 years in prison, sentences to be served concurrently. Hendricks was sentenced to 25 years. Dieter, as Patricia Foster's actual killer, received life imprisonment without possibility of parole. In her sentencing remarks, the judge emphasized the broader impact of the Construction Mafia's activities. The crimes committed by these individuals have not only taken lives and stolen money, they have stolen hope from thousands of families waiting for homes. They have stolen safety from communities. They have stolen trust in our institutions. The convictions represented a significant victory in the fight against organized crime in Port Haven, but no one believed it marked the end of the Construction Mafia. Jason Venter remained at large, presumably continuing his brother's operations. Other gang leaders were already positioning themselves to fill the power vacuum. Moreover, the investigation into corruption within the city government was still ongoing. Theodore Marcus, the suspended housing counselor, was facing imminent charges. Several other officials were under investigation. The tentacles of corruption reached deep into Port Haven's power structures. For the residents of Westfield Township, the daily reality remained challenging. Gang violence continued, though perhaps with less intensity. Small businesses still faced extortion demands. Children still grew up in an environment where gunshots were commonplace. Yet there were signs of positive change. Work on the Symphony Road project was progressing steadily. The first families were scheduled to move into completed homes in August 2024. Community organizations were becoming more vocal in their opposition to gang activity, drawing strength from the successful prosecutions. Port Haven's new police commissioner, appointed in June 2024, made fighting the Construction Mafia his top priority. With additional resources from the national government, specialized units were established to protect construction sites, investigate extortion complaints, and target gang leadership. Mayor Clark, speaking at a community forum in July 2024, acknowledged that the battle was far from over, but expressed cautious optimism. For too long, criminals have operated in the shadows, protected by fear and corruption. We're finally bringing them into the light. We're showing that they can be defeated. The story of Port Haven's Construction Mafia is still unfolding. The criminal networks built by Marcus Venter and others continue to operate, adapting to new challenges and seeking new opportunities for profit. The corruption that facilitated these networks has not been fully exposed or eliminated. Yet the prosecution of Venter and his associates has demonstrated that even the most powerful criminals are not beyond the reach of justice. The resumption of work at Symphony Road has shown that criminal intimidation can be overcome with sufficient determination and resources. For families like Margaret Benson's, the most important outcome is the one they've waited decades for: a safe, decent home to call their own. As the first residents prepare to move into the Symphony Road development, there is a sense that something fundamental has changed in Port Haven. The Construction Mafia hasn't been defeated, not completely, but its aura of invincibility has been shattered. Its operations have been exposed to public scrutiny. Its leaders have faced consequences. Most importantly, the people of Port Haven have begun to believe that change is possible. They have seen that standing up to criminal power, while dangerous, is not futile. They have witnessed the slow but steady progress of a housing project that many thought would never be completed. In a city where criminals once operated with impunity, a new message is being sent. No one is above the law. No criminal enterprise, no matter how powerful, can withstand the combined efforts of determined law enforcement, honest government, and courageous communities. The road ahead remains long and difficult. The networks of crime and corruption built over decades will not be dismantled overnight. The social conditions that allow gangs to recruit new members, poverty, inequality, lack of opportunity, persist. But Patricia Foster's sacrifice was not in vain. The investigation triggered by her murder has exposed the Construction Mafia to unprecedented scrutiny. The housing project she died inspecting is finally becoming a reality for families who have waited generations for decent homes. In the neighborhoods of Westfield Township, people speak of before and after. Before the Venter trial, when fear ruled unchallenged, and after, when hope began to return. Small business owners whisper about refusing extortion payments. Community leaders organize public forums on fighting gang influence. Ordinary citizens share information with police. These are small acts of courage, but together they represent a community reclaiming its future from those who would steal it. They represent a city declaring that development will not be held hostage to criminal interests. They represent a society asserting that the rule of law matters. The story of Port Haven's Construction Mafia, of Marcus Venter's rise and fall, of Patricia Foster's tragic death, of the Symphony Road housing project's journey from concept to reality, is still being written. Its final chapters depend on countless decisions yet to be made by officials and citizens alike. What's clear is that the city has reached a turning point. The Construction Mafia has been exposed, its methods revealed, its leaders prosecuted. The conditions that allowed it to flourish, corruption, fear, and institutional weakness, are being addressed, however imperfectly. For the first time in years, the people of Port Haven can look to the future with something more than resignation. They can imagine a city where housing projects proceed without criminal interference, where small businesses operate without paying protection money, where children grow up without the constant sound of gunfire. It's not yet that city. But with each home built at Symphony Road, with each corrupt official removed from office, with each gang member brought to justice, it comes one step closer. In the words of Patricia Foster's daughter at the memorial service, "My mother believed in a better Port Haven. She died because of that belief. The least we can do is make sure her death wasn't meaningless. The least we can do is build the city she believed in." That work continues. In Westfield Township and across Port Haven, people are building, not just homes, but hope. Not just infrastructure, but integrity. Not just buildings, but the foundations of a more just society. The Construction Mafia hasn't disappeared. The criminal networks remain powerful. The struggle for Port Haven's soul is far from over. But for the first time in many years, that struggle no longer seems hopeless. In the shadow of the mountain, beneath the postcard views, a new Port Haven is slowly, painfully being born. And unlike the city above, this one belongs not to criminals and corrupt officials, but to the people who have waited too long for a place to call home. Did this story of Port Haven's Underworld and the fight against the Construction Mafia surprise you? Drop a comment below. Our next video explores another shocking crime syndicate operation. Make sure you've got notifications turned on so you don't miss it. If you want to learn more about how organized crime infiltrates legitimate businesses, hit that subscribe button right now.